Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the N1 Fitness Podcast. Today we have got a Q&A episode for you. So you guys sent in some questions. We're going to answer them. And I am joined by Darce, my main squeeze. She's going to ask the questions and I'm going to answer them. So let's dig right in here.
Hi guys. Okay, so our first question is from Jen Kaminsky, and Jen said, I would love to know more about juicing or buying juices, and if they're good for the morning or every so often when you're out and about and need a quick fix.
So an important thing to know is the difference between juicing and blending. So juicing strips the fiber. You don't get the fiber with typical juice trucks and things like that. If you're going to blend up all the ingredients that are in that juice, you are getting the fiber. So that's a pretty important distinction because you probably want the fiber that's in all those foods. So when you juice a whole bunch of different fruits and veggies, you're going to strip the fiber out of those fruits and veggies, and therefore it's going to be a lot more concentrated dose of whatever you throw in there. So something to think about too is, if you're going to throw, say, some juice company will say there's 2 pounds of, fresh fruit and veg in there. Think about if you're able to eat that much in whole food form. So I prefer to have people eat whole food because your satiation signals are intact. And it might sound kind of odd, but this is a form of food processing. So juicing is a form of food processing. So just like nuts, it's probably easier to consume a whole bunch of calories via nut butter than it is to actually, chew on all those nuts, or even say deshell those nuts one by one and eat them. What are you more likely to consume more of? So that's how I want you to think about juicing, but then also remember that you're going to strip the fiber when you juice versus blend. And are they good for the morning? It depends. A question with that you always want to ask is, what's the alternative? So is it going to be a 200 calorie juice with fresh fruit and veggies in there? Or is it going to be a bagel with cream cheese on it that's super calorie dense and that you don't tolerate, or something like that? So it's important to ask yourself, what's the alternative? Because context always matters.
And just to follow up with that, are there any particular juices that you've heard of that you would recommend over others?
Personally, no. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't be able to play favorites. I honestly haven't tried that many of them. I tried one from the juice truck. It was pretty tasty. I don't know what the calorie count was on it. The ingredients just said, whatever was in there. And I think the way they list those ingredients is whatever has the most. So say there's the most of, pineapple, oranges, kale, turmeric, and whatever. They list those ingredients in the order that there's the most of them in there. So if pineapple is listed first, that means there's the most pineapple in there. If orange is listed first, then there's the most orange. And chances are something like a turmeric, a spice, will be listed at the end, because if they had the most turmeric in there, that would not be a pleasant beverage to drink.
Right. And that actually goes for essentially any ingredient list on any foods.
100%. Yeah.
So I guess for our listeners, when it comes to that, maybe just do a little bit more research in terms of, how they go about blending these juices or doing the juicing with that information in mind. And then to dovetail off of that a bit, there's another question was, are juice cleanses good or bad?
So again, coming back, context, it depends. It depends where you're at. So if somebody has a super shitty diet and they eat fast food, twice a day, and then breakfast is like driving through the Tim Hortons drive-through, they get like a double and a breakfast sandwich, and then they decide to do a juice cleanse for a little bit, say, 3 to 5 days, maybe 7, and they lose some weight, they start to feel better, they're not so inflamed, I mean, a juice cleanse might be a better option than what that person was doing before. But for someone that is already eating a healthful diet, is of a healthy weight, and they feel, look, and perform well, then, a juice cleanse is probably not going to be the best idea. And when we think about, someone will say, I want to go on a juice cleanse and detox, for example. We have a tendency of thinking of adding things in to detox. So instead of, say, fasting and not giving your whole digestive system a break and not putting additional things into your body, we think, I'm going to go on a juice fast and get in as much fruit and veg as I can. But a lot of the times, just simply not eating and maybe just drinking water for a little bit, like, hey, try 16, 18, maybe even 24 hours where you don't eat. You can get a ton of the benefits out of that by just not having another input via the juice cleanse. And also, you're just going to save a shitload of money because those juice cleanses are super pricey. And in general, I'd say they're not very effective.
Well, and it's kind of your habits as an individual too. I mean, if you're going to do a juice cleanse and then go right back to eating a bunch of crap afterwards, that is kind of defeating the purpose. So if you're somebody who starts to feel really like they're missing out, and that you're basically starving yourself, and so once you finish it, you're just going to go back to your previous ways of eating whatever you want, then that's not really helping.
Yeah, I haven't met one person that has gone on a juice cleanse and then, tailed into a quality diet after that.
Right.
It's just like, if you want to put in something consistent, put in something that you can sustain long term.
Right. Okay, so our next question is from Haley Bogue, and Haley asks, so I know that sitting down on a job all day is bad calorie burning wise, but it's so bad for many other things as well, like musculoskeletal disorders. I know I was going to mess up. Back pain, disc herniation, etc. Dental hygienists have such a high risk of all of that stuff, and it's stressing me out. Obviously, moving as much as possible is going to help you stay healthier, but is there a way to know or put into a figure to grasp that makes sense of, say, 10,000 steps counteracts 5 hours of sitting or that sort of thing?
So, unfortunately, you can't really counteract or erase inputs. So, for example, if I eat a bag of chips, I can't then eat a big bowl of spinach and erase that bag of chips, right? The bag of chips is still there, but, the spinach is as well. So sitting is still there. That's your job. That's what you're going to do on a daily basis. That's what you've chosen. And so the best option is just to work with that. Stressing out about it, it's not really helping you. I would say work with it, move as much as you can, but to think that you can counteract or erase the inputs that are going on via sitting by walking a bunch, you can't really, but I'd say still walk 10,000 steps and move a bunch, right? If you can walk even more, awesome. And then if you have a tendency where, say, you need to strengthen your posterior chain, so doing some deadlifts and things like that, hamstring work, and strengthening areas that you're susceptible to having issues with because of the sitting position, do that as well. But unfortunately, you can't erase the input.
Right. Yeah. There's no magic number that can fix that, unfortunately.
Right.
Okay. So another question. I heard green tea helps with weight loss. Is that true?
So if you guys listened to the last podcast with Eric Helms, we went through what sort of matters as far as the hierarchy of nutrition. And what matters most is calories. So if you're eating above your maintenance calorie intake and you decide that you're going to add in, 2 or 3 cups of green tea per day or take it in some sort of supplement form, you're still going to gain weight. So calories are king. Supplements are so minimal. And I've said this before in an Instagram post. You're going to burn more calories from walking to the supplement store to buy that supplement than you are actually taking it. In my opinion, it's not that the green tea is going to hurt you, but to think that it's going to produce awesome weight loss results, or really weight loss results, period, is misleading. It's just not. So you want to focus on what matters, not so much this, it's not the sexy stuff, but it's, moving, sleeping, nutrition, and stress management.
Well, and kind of going back to what you said earlier, if you were replacing coffee where you were drinking that with 2 sugars and 2 creams, if you're going to replace that with green tea, obviously that would be a better choice. But green tea on its own, you're saying, doesn't necessarily lead to weight loss.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And the weight loss result from that would be from reduced calorie intake, because you're not adding 2 sugars and 2 creams to the green tea.
Right. Cool. Okay, so next question. My skin is a problem. I keep getting rashes and skin breakouts, especially around the holidays. Is there anything I can do?
So skin issues are the number one priority with skin issues is gut health. So make sure that you're not eating foods that you don't tolerate. If your skin is jacked up, you're eating foods you don't tolerate. I used to get pretty harsh eczema, and as soon as I cleared up my diet, it went away. That is obviously an N of 1, but I've seen this so many times. People start eating higher quality diet, possibly losing some weight, and their skin clears up, and just, you've seen those people that just look super healthy and their skin's glowing. For me personally, if I eat too much dairy, I get breakouts. So I just choose not to do that, because I understand that if my skin is acting up, it means my gut's acting up, whether I am aware of it or not. So just know that the skin is a reflection of what's going on inside. And as far as it being around the holidays, this can be a pretty stressful time for people as well. Sleep might be hindered, or maybe just, you're spending a lot more time with your family and you're getting stressed out, and yeah, exactly. And that stress response is weakening the immune system, and therefore you're less tolerant of, incoming food, stuff like that. Booze intake typically goes up around the holidays as well. And you're not going to sleep as well.
Goes up around the holidays. I mean, to me, that makes complete sense, because all of a sudden people are bringing in all sorts of baked goods, and more parties are happening, and wine and cheese and everything delicious starts to come out more and more around the holidays as well. So
definitely, yeah, and that ties back in with the gut health and what you're tolerating and what you're not. So sort of the perfect storm around the holidays with stress, sleep, food, booze, all that sort of stuff. So, but if it's not even, if you're someone that struggles with your skin just year round, you need to look at your diet first and foremost.
Yeah. Okay. So now we have another question from Krista. She says, what do you do if you know you have a photo shoot coming up where you and your body needs to be in tip-top shape? Do you have any things that you do to prepare yourself? Maybe up your step count or drink more water, perhaps? I have some cool opportunities coming up and was wondering what I could refine so I'm ready.
So if for some folks, they don't know that I do some photo shoots here and there. So Krista's wondering how I sort of prep for those. And most importantly, I just stay in shape year round, because it's so much easier to keep up than it is to catch up. So that's first and foremost. But then if I book something and I know it's coming up in, say, the next week or something like that, it's a very last minute industry. So you typically don't know, a long time ahead of time if and when you're shooting. So staying in shape definitely helps. But if I'm going to tighten things up a little bit, I will probably skip the booze altogether, tying back in with the last questions around gut health, nutrition, and skin. I won't eat anything that's potentially going to irritate my gut, because I want my skin to look good. So dairy is obviously out of the question. And then if I wanted to even tighten things up a tad bit more nutrition-wise to improve my body composition, then I'd probably just, skip any sort of extracurriculars, but I do my best to just stay in shape year round. So you could, if you're somebody that needs to lose additional weight leading into that, you can increase your movement. Obviously, food is really important, and then make sure that you're sleeping really, really well. Prioritize sleep, because if you're not going to look better on a shit night's sleep.
Yeah, totally. Okay, and next question. How do I get rid of my bunions? My doctor put orthotics in my shoes, but they don't seem to be helping. What are your thoughts on the surgical shaving of the bony growth to alleviate pain and discomfort?
So I talked to this person that had this question actually in person, and I added it to the Q&A because I thought it would be really helpful for you guys. So this person had developed some bunions on the outside of, it's like the inside of their foot near their big toe. And after asking a few questions, I realized that this person had been wearing heels for 40 years and were now in their 50s. So spent a ton of time in heels, and just know that the body compensates. So the body actually realized that, hey, I'm going to be hanging out in these heels for a long time. I need to compensate and alleviate pain, much like a callus is. If you go hit the gym, you get some calluses on your hands. It's just so your hand is essentially protected. The body's amazing that way. So that is why this person had the bunion to begin with. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor put orthotics in her shoes. So first of all, in my opinion, obviously taking the heels out of the equation. Don't wear any sort of heel where your foot is jammed into this tiny little shoebox. That's one of the primary reasons why the foot adapted that way. And then secondly, orthotics, the way you want to think about these is that they're a cast. So if I injure my arm, or I put my arm in a cast, I am going to lose function in that arm. It's going to get weaker. It's going to have less range of motion, less mobility, all that sort of stuff. So an orthotic does the same thing to your foot. It molds to your foot perfectly, so your foot, the muscles in your feet don't have to maintain an arch and actually work while you walk. And this is why I'm such a fan of flat shoes. Now, if you're wearing an orthotic all the time right now, don't just get rid of your orthotics because Marcus isn't a fan of orthotics. That might screw up your feet. It might actually put you in a lot more pain than is necessary. So you need to break into that and say, go without your orthotics for an hour a day at first, for the first week or two, and sort of break yourself in. Just like you wouldn't, if you weren't going to the gym at all, you wouldn't go to, 5 days a week right off the bat. You need to break your body in and let it adapt. But that's the way I want folks to think about orthotics, is like a cast, because arches are developed. Babies don't have arches when they're born. Their arches are developed, so you need to do things in order to maintain your arch. And being barefoot as much as possible is first and foremost, and then also going with flat shoes as much as you can. So you don't want to wear a heeled shoe all the time, where not only can you create bunions by putting your foot in a tiny little shoebox, but you can also shorten up your heel cord to your Achilles, shorten up your calf, and then it just goes up the chain. So you shorten up your hamstring, and then you start to develop, glute and low back issues, and it's just the feet are our contact points to the earth. So it's super, super important to keep those things functioning properly.
Okay, so it makes sense in terms of preventative measures to stop wearing heels if that's something that you do every day. And with orthotics, trying to not take that Band-Aid approach quite as much. So would you say that by taking out the orthotics and walking barefoot or in flat shoes as much as possible, is that going to help get rid of the bunions? Or is that...
I would say it's possible, right? If the bunion doesn't need to be there, then again, the body will adapt in the other direction. But in this case, this person had worn heels for 40 years. Uh-huh. So I mean, to think that, for example, that bunion is going to go away in, 4 months is probably unlikely,
But
right?
it is possible for them to go away if you start taking the right action.
It should improve, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then just for the last part of her question, what are your thoughts on the surgical shaving of the bone?
Oh, right, I missed that. Yeah. I'm not a fan because I'm not a fan unless the inputs are dealt with first. Mm-hmm. So if you're just going to shave down that bony growth, and then keep wearing heels,
right,
you're just like, what's the point in that, right? You know what I mean? So you need to first address the input and then decide what you want to do as far as the surgery goes, because it might just be painful and it might not go away in a short enough period of time. Yeah. So first and foremost, address the input and then go from there, cross that bridge when you get to it, kind of thing.
Right. And how long would you say is like to start out with, like 6 months, a year? Is that?
Shit. I can't answer that question. I'm not sure. Just got to see how she goes.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Next question. What can I eat for breakfast that's healthy? Nothing seems appealing.
Okay, so the food industry has conditioned us to think of what breakfast foods are and aren't. So for some reason, with cereal, right? Classic breakfast food. Oatmeal, which is a really solid one, but then things like toast. I mean, people will start eating eggs and then they say they get sick of those. So if there are points in time where nothing seems appealing, I think the simplest approach is just to not eat breakfast. Like if you're not hungry in the morning.
Well, but what if you're hungry? Like it sounds like she wants to eat breakfast.
Yeah. Recondition your thoughts around breakfast. So if you...
Yeah, because technically you can eat whatever you want for breakfast.
You can eat whatever you want. Yeah. If you look at like a hunter-gatherer situation, for example, I mean, only recently have there been quote unquote breakfast foods. Mm-hmm. For, millions of years, we ate what was around. So it's a conditioned thing around breakfast foods, and you're going to have to sort of recondition yourself to eat the foods that make you feel, look, and perform better, that you actually also just enjoy. And tying back into that first juicing question, if you enjoy blending or a juice for breakfast and it fits in with your goals and that works for you, that's a great thing. If that is the appealing thing over something like, again, a bagel with cream cheese that, is super calorie dense and all that sort of stuff, I'd say the juice is a win.
And, smoothies in general, I mean, that's the only thing I ever eat in the morning. And that's a really easy way to get your veggies in as well. Get a lot of leafy greens in there and masking it with taste of a banana or something. I'm just trying to think of some options to get this person, because it's kind of hard because they're not here, so we don't know what they like. But
exactly. And maybe they don't tolerate or eat eggs, or maybe like they can't get around eating meat or fish for breakfast.
A lot of people actually don't tolerate eggs, and that sounds like a weird thing because they're such a staple, and I don't know, they just feel like a really easy, good, cheap filler food to be able to throw down. But yeah, that's actually a really common irritant for people. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Also, just this is a personal thing that I think needs to be kind of focused on too. There's a big difference between making oatmeal from straight up oats as opposed to the quick and easy ones that you get in the grocery store. Do you want to touch on that a bit? Yeah,
if you're going to get a sort of maple and brown sugar flavored packet of oatmeal, that is a lot different than oats that you make yourself, that you microwave with, say, water or maybe some coconut milk, almond milk, something like that. They add a whole bunch of funky additives and sugar and all that sort of stuff. It tastes delicious, but if you're eating that bagel and cream cheese for breakfast, and then you can make that switch to that sort of oatmeal, like a sugar flavored oatmeal, and you prefer to make small shifts over time, that could be a win on the way to switching to a regular unsweetened oatmeal that you'd make yourself. But do keep in mind that those things are sweetened with a whole bunch of sugar, and oatmeal naturally doesn't taste that sweet.
Yeah.
Use fresh fruit instead.
Totally. Okay, next is from Angela, and she says, how can I move towards more of a plant-based eating approach and still lose weight?
So Angela was a client of mine, and she was eating a little more animal protein before, and she's wanting to switch away from as many animal sources of food. So basically, as far as still losing weight, calories, again, are king. So you need to regulate your intake overall. And you still want to focus on the same principles. So whole, single, or minimal ingredient foods. And emphasize food quality, because those things are going to keep you more satiated than processed foods, hands down. And the key to weight loss is actually spontaneous reduction of calories. And really, the only way to maintain that over time is to eat more filling foods, because being hungry is just not maintainable. So if you eat, for the most part, whole, single / minimal ingredient foods, you're going to feel more satiated, and therefore you're going to eat less calories overall with less effort involved. And for vegetarians specifically, sometimes, or a plant-based approach, sometimes it can be a little harder from a fullness and satiation standpoint, because animal sources of protein, for example, are so satiating and they fill you up quite a bit. So it's totally doable with a plant-based approach. Some folks might find it a little bit more difficult without animal protein, but it's totally doable.
Okay, and then the final question we have for today is, what is your personal routine around water intake?
So I didn't touch on this in my second podcast, and somebody asked me about it. So first thing in the morning, I chug a big glass of water. That's virtually the first thing I do. I'll have a cup or sometimes 2 of coffee, so there's some water in there as well. And then I don't actually think about water a ton throughout the rest of the day unless I really feel like I need it. I eat probably 90+% of whole single ingredient foods, and those foods come with a lot of water in them already. So fruits and veggies are loaded with water. If I'm going to do, say, some oatmeal, I'm putting a couple cups of water in there with the oatmeal. So I'm naturally, sort of just as a byproduct, getting a whole bunch of water intake with all of the foods that I eat. But if you're eating, like if you have a Pop-Tart for breakfast like that, there's no water in that. You know what I mean? There's not. If you're eating convenience foods, there's just so much less fluid in those foods that you're going to have to pay more attention to your overall water intake to begin with. But as your food quality goes up, the quality of your diet increases, you typically have to worry about hydration less. Now, if you're an elite athlete, you're sweating a ton, you're training a bunch, then you're going to need to focus on water more so. But we're just talking about sort of the everyday individual here that's not training 3 to 4 hours a day. So as your food quality goes up, water intake, this is something that I've actually changed my mind on over time. I don't think that water intake is quite as important as I used to think it was, but I am eating a higher quality diet now than I ever have, and so I'm just noticing some different things. So look at your diet, look at the quality, and then also just pay attention to your thirst. If you're thirsty, you need to drink water. But if your diet is high quality for the most part, then it might not be something you have to worry too much about.
Yeah. You know what's weird? I've noticed personally for myself, whenever I'm not actually hungry, but I'm craving fruit, I've realized that's actually me just being dehydrated and needing water, because there's so much water in fruit that I'm not actually needing the calories of it. I'm just thirsty. So just getting to know yourself and learning what sort of cravings you start to have and actually interpreting them for what they are. Just to touch on something else too, there, we talked about coffee, and this can be our final question because I got totally shamed for this the other day. I was under the impression that coffee, the caffeine in it actually negates the fact that you're drinking water in there. That's a really commonly held belief that I myself had, and it turns out not the case.
So coffee intake and tea intake adds towards your total hydration status. It does. So, but with caffeine, for example, it increases your need for sodium.
Oh.
So that is where I think this sort of thing came from, that people noticed that they just started excreting a bunch of water when they drank coffee, for example, and it increases your need for sodium. But then also, for a lot of folks, coffee and tea, maybe 1 or 2 cups in the morning, is actually all the water that they're getting to begin with.
Right.
So it might actually appear like that the coffee or the tea is dehydrating them, whereas they're just taking in fluid and then going and peeing.
Right.
So yeah, but the liquid in the coffee is adding to your overall hydration status.
Right.
Yeah, so that is it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks, Dars, for asking awesome questions.
Well, they weren't mine, but...
well, elaborating on awesome questions. Yeah. Thank you guys for sending in all these great cues. And if you do want questions answered in future Q&As, you can email me, hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and I will do my best to get to them. And as you've noticed, there's a lot of context goes into all these questions. That's sort of... It depends who, what, where, when, why. So I'll do my best to answer the questions as specifically as possible, but you will start noticing some general trends that context matters. But either way, love the cues, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.